So, Kev, to kick this one to you, with the Steelers going on the road and beating the Bengals in probably one of the more shocking results from week one, how would you rate Joe Burrow's performance against the Steelers in week one?
It was horrible. I mean, aside from that late fourth quarter push to where they got that touchdown with Jamar Chase. By the way, all they needed to do was kick the extra point and they win the game because the clock ran out to 0. Minka Fitzpatrick comes out and blocks the extra point. So kudos to Minka. He's the MVP of the game by far. I'll get to that in a second. But in terms of Joe Burrow's performance, you go out and you sign 3 offensive linemen to better protect Joe Burrow. You go out there and you allow him to get sacked again 7 times. TJ Watt leaves this game with a torn pec and is potentially out for the season, and you still let the Steelers into the backfield to crush Joe Burrow. This is not how the Bengals want to start their potential Super Bowl rewrite or, Super Bowl rerun. And it was just awful. 4 interceptions, 2 of them being absolutely horrific. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this is the guy that was in the Super Bowl last year. This is the guy that I hyped up last year. And Kyle said, it is week one. Everybody's due for a bad game. But for this kind of performance, for you to be outdueled by Mitch Trubisky, not that Mitch had better numbers, but I mean, he was only sacked once. Mitch Trubisky actually had a touch. He didn't turn the ball over. So what are we talking about right now? A division battle. You lose at home and you just play absolutely atrocious. I'm not understanding. They were not able to run the ball either. Joe Mixon had 27 carries and only had 82 yards. Joe Burrow was the leading rusher in terms of yards per attempt with 7.8 yards. Why is it that your star quarterback is getting crushed the way that he is, and he's your leading rusher to a certain extent? I understand that Joe had had more yards in total, but for him to be the most yards per carry on your team is kind of insane. QBR 42.1. His passer rating was 61. 33 of 53. Why are you throwing the ball 53 times? I can't wrap my head around the fact that this was the Cincinnati Bengals team that went to the Super Bowl last year. It's honestly just completely disappointing. And there's not really much of an excuse because you look at it. Yeah, Jamar Chase got his looks, but he had 16 targets. And then T. Higgins leaves this game with a concussion. So they're down a receiver potentially for next week as well. I don't know, man. Cincinnati's got to get it together. They played solid on defense for the most part because they only allowed 75 rushing yards from Pittsburgh. Mitch Trubisky didn't have the greatest game in terms of passing efficiency. It was 21 and 38, a 48 QBR, and then a passer rating of 78.2. So it's like, Cincinnati did what they could, but obviously it wasn't enough. Both teams played pretty pitiful, but obviously Joe Burrow being the better quarterback by a mile really, really underperformed. And I'm not going to say it's concerning because you have 16 more games to go, but you got to keep an eye on this because if Joe gets into a slump and Joe's continuously on his back, I don't know if Cincinnati's going to be able to repeat what they did last year.
Yeah, Kev. I mean, I'm with you 100% on this one. When I look back at this performance from Joe Burrow, he was atrocious. There's just no other way to say it. And I know that comes off as harsh, but it was a bad performance. There's just no other way to state it. The guy had 5 total turnovers, 4 of which were interceptions, 1 of which was a fumble. You just can't have that. And I understand that it's week one, and I'm not going to blow this out of proportion saying that like Joe Burrow's washed and this is going to be indicative of the rest of the year. I don't expect that to be the case. There's a very good chance that Joe Burrow next week could bounce back, throw for 400 yards passing, throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns, and it's like this week never even happened. But against the Steelers, let's face it, the Steelers are an average team. The best part of the Steelers is their defense, and their defense is what showed today because their defense was hellacious in every single way imaginable. They turned the ball over 5 times. And not only that, they were able to sack Joe Burrow 7 times. And that's another point of emphasis that I want to focus on with Cincinnati here. Joe Burrow was bad, but their offensive line might have been just as bad. For Burrow to get sacked 7 times, despite the fact that they spent millions of dollars this offseason to bolster their offensive line by bringing guys in like Ted Karras from the Patriots, for bringing guys in like Alex Kappa from the Buccaneers, you would expect that Cincinnati would get some sort of return on that investment. That did not happen in week one. And that was despite the fact that TJ Watt left the game with what's believed to be a torn pec. Pittsburgh's defense came to play today, And Cincinnati had no answer for them on the offensive line. And it led to a residual effect with Joe Burrow's play because of how bad he looked. And I understand that, with how bad the Bengals played, the Bengals almost won this game. The Bengals were within an extra point with 2 seconds left to win the game after Joe Burrow connected with Jamar Chase with a touchdown at the end of the game. But I have to give credit. Minka Fitzpatrick probably made the play of the day, blocking that extra point that set the game into overtime, gave the Steelers a chance, and then the Steelers capitalized on it by winning with a game-winning field goal at the buzzer before the end of overtime. So, looking back at this performance, look, I got to give credit where credit is due. The Steelers came to play today, and the Bengals looked atrocious.